when we are using all parts of animals in makeup, cosmetics industry, in you name it, it goes everywhere in the food, the gelatin, the meat, but only leather gets to be blamed, which is shocking now. Welcome to the episode 7 of Leathertainment podcast on the go, and we are still in the farm here in Netherlands. This time we're gonna talk about the animal welfare and ethical concerns in leather industry.
Yeah, we
Lori?
couldn't have chosen a better place because this is an organic farm.
Absolutely. This is a great way to illustrate what animal farming can be, to have happy animals with a good life, which is all of us consciously want if we have a choice. But the issue is a lot more complex than that, and we can take the same approach of dividing into three sections: the rawhide, which leather industry doesn't have much control over, but it's the fact of things. And with industrialization of meat production, these problems and ethical concerns start to surface. So, what are some of these ethical concerns, and why are they happening?
So one, of course, is a lot of reportages on mistreating animals, and unfortunately, this is there, of course. And as you mentioned, this is where as well the leather industry has very little impact on how to correct it. I think this is more us all as a human body to look into what can we do in our consumer behavior. So be a little bit more cautious about where my meat is coming from. We were led into having almost every day fish or meat on our plates, where in the past that was not necessary. And I think for humanity, it is not necessary to have that kind of a high meat consumption. So reconsider again as well here, what are we doing as human society and human body, and reduce, but then with the reduction as well be more selective and more careful into what am I buying and where is it coming from and how was it raised. Do I really need a piece of meat which traveled around the world, or can I buy a piece of meat which is coming from my local butcher?
Right. And again, it comes down to our choices and practices. It's easy to finger point, that's the guilty party, it's the meat industry, or it's the consumer, or it's the leather industry. But I think it's a holistic result of what we all want and create for those wants. As you said, we have a lot more meat today, a lot more affordable, accessible, more of us can eat it. But in order to get there, while meat industry is trying to respond to that kind of demand and desire, these factory farming initiatives start to reduce the quality of animals, and then cruelty may become the question here. So we all have parts in what we created here, but there is also ways to kind of come back to balance what the natural process was before. We didn't have that much meat because we didn't really need that much meat. It was expensive, and perhaps it was the way it should be. Now we're trying to go back to it by having farms like this. Animals can decide when they can come out, go for milking completely in their own free will, and they're much happier than some counterparts there in factory setups without any room or
Or
being
even
able to enter.
daylight?
Yeah, it's sad, but we all are part of the reason that came to this point. You think there will be uh, improvements in the near future, animal welfare and the way animals are treated in the farming practices, even though this is outside of leather industry's control?
Yeah, from a humanitarian point of view, I do have the hope. But then when we look into numbers, it's quite interesting to see how little, even in a rich country as Germany, where I am from, how little people care for the animal welfare. It's really more price driven. And that scares me. And
Mhm.
the question is, how much initiatives and how much farmers have a success if they decide we go for organic, or we give the animal the five freedoms that they can have access to all what they need, and that they have a stressless life, and they can choose, as you just mentioned before. Here, the cows can choose when they want to go in and when they want to go out, and when they are ready to get milked. And um, so it feels very natural and very organic here.
Right.
But then there are other areas where it's not that case. And unfortunately, the consumer for the moment is taking the choice in the supermarket and saying, I want it cheap, and I want it even cheaper. So that doesn't give the margin to those kind of farmers who have maybe a regenerative farming approach, or where they treat animal from a different perspective. Demeter farming is very much as well in balance with the farming and the understanding that animals are a crucial part of the ecosystem because they fertilize the ground, and they help that plants can grow richer, and so that those farmers don't need pesticides or don't need artificial fertilizer. So it all plays hand in hand, and these kind of farmings are more expensive, and that is probably again where then we have this separation of the society into the people who can afford it and to the people who unfortunately then need to go into the supermarket. What we see now is that as well, big supermarket chains are introducing bigger and bigger variety of organic farmed products to their consumers. So, but then I don't know how much do those supermarkets screw those farmers in the sense of price sensitivity,
Right.
and can the farmers really do best practice,
Mm.
or are they starting somewhere hidden to do something that we are not aware of, but just to be able to supply into this direction?
Yeah, it's a good point. It again drops a good amount of homework or responsibility to consumers, to us. We see a lot of labels coming into this level of the market as well, grass-fed beef or organic beef. I don't really know what that exactly means. Like when I hear grass-fed beef, this is what I'm imagining. The cow is in the natural area and live grass they're eating. But we were discussing a little before this episode, and that could be the grass from last year, which is the hay, in a closed environment. Maybe that's also technically considered qualify for this kind of label. I think um, in the business sense, we are very creative of coming up with these names that beautifully pictured in our imagination when we see it on the packaging, but sometimes the reality is not completely translating the same thing. It goes hand in hand whenever we see these kind of claims in the packaging of the meat or products. We really try to understand, go next step, like what really is happening, how these cows are raised, and are they really happy or not. But I want to bring it back to one aspect which is very falsely pictured in consumers' behavior or affecting consumers' behavior. Some animal rights movements, organizations running campaigns showing, we heard it from Daniela, our friend, um, talking about this poster with a cow with baby calf, and it says, don't use leather. So appealing to an emotional picture, sending a very strong but wrong message about leather, because it has nothing to do with leather, where we already have this animal as part of sustaining human life as a protein and all that. I think the story is much deeper than that, and we need to do this in the most respectful way to the life of the animal and the conditions they grow, and we need to tell the story. So what can we do to make people aware of this concept that are pictured in a very wrong way?
Yeah, that is really something where I'm astonished that these animal welfare organizations target leather rather than helping educate the end consumer about question where your meat is coming from.
Mm.
And the animal doesn't get killed for the leather. And we had that in our first episode in the myth of leather. So now we know this is not true. So why is it that these animal welfare organizations still target on this kind of product rather than going into the front of the supermarkets and educating the end consumer about where's your meat coming from? And eat less meat, but buy it then as well free range animals, animals which have the right to go in and out and choose their daily life in the best way for the animal, and then have this meat on your plate rather than having one which is stressed and maybe full of hormones and. So I really have a, have a hard time to understand why leather is here on the focus. And again, they are supporting this belief in the meanwhile, where every second person, according to the British UK Leather Association, every second believes that animals get killed for leather. Yeah, because of those images. Yeah.
Exactly. This is so wrong, but I think the more we talked about it, people put the pieces together because we know we eat the meat, and leather can't be or shouldn't be the the reason or scapegoat. Like animals are killed, leather is the worst thing. The When we are using all parts of animals in makeup, cosmetics industry, in you name it, it goes everywhere in the food, the gelatin, the meat, but only leather gets to be blamed, which is shocking now. And I think going back to the origins of human civilization, we have been hunting and eating animals. So I think the issue comes from a little bit of over humanizing animals because we have a similar form of life. They have eyes, ears, and legs. They can move like us. But we shouldn't forget that plants are also living beings. They have a soul as well that animates that physical structure. So we also kill vegetables to eat it. And I think at the higher level, when we remember we are actually bigger than this body, this physical form, we have a soul which never dies. It's infinite with all animals and vegetables, the same thing. And at that level, we understand we are a whole thing, and we are not offended by sustaining the greater life form. I don't think a deer is upset when the lion eats it because at the soul level they know this is the circle of life, and no matter what, every living being, vegetable, human, or animal, ends up the same way. No physical form is infinite. But I think that needs to be um, considered in the most respectful form because, again, it's a huge sacrifice for an animal to live such a long life growing that meat and other resources for human beings. And it shouldn't be taken for granted for just profit focused and industrial formats. The animals are treated just like a product. I think that's the biggest steering away from the natural form we did with this industrialization. But we have to come back to the origin.
Yeah, and then as well, I mean, as we grow those animals for our own nutrition chain, um, it is a question of respect to use 100% of the animal, as you just mentioned. And we forget this. Now we replaced very often these hides by alternative materials, and we throw them just in the landfill where they cause a different problem. Now it would be better to use those hides, and I think that is as well something where we, from a human perspective, we need to look into, can we afford it? To say, you're coming from, we had this discussion before, deforestation issues. Yes, and we are all sensitive to this topic. But now we are saying that this animal is a bad animal because it grew up there, and now I'm not allowed to use a hide anymore, which creates this other problem in the environment, rather than saying, okay, what can we do as a human body so that we can stop this deforestation? I mean, the world does not own Brazil, but we play as if we are the owners and if we are entitled to tell them what to do with their own land. The challenge is that unfortunately this is the lung of our planet, at least as we perceive it, and it is, yes, in a human collective understanding and approach to say, what can we do together so that we can stop this deforestation, and it's not by putting a deforestation law out there.
Right. It's more like changing our conscious or our perception as consumers and business owners to be respectful to the nature, to the animals that we grow, and we make a living off of, either form of protein or profit. So I think there are initiatives definitely pushing things and people and corporations this way. And in the experimental sense, I know that animals that are treated well had a happy life, had a unstressful harvesting process of the meat, produce higher quality meat, produce higher quality leather, which leather industry is all about, but they cannot control it. What can you share about that result of treating animals respectfully, giving much better products at the end as well?
So that is as well an observation, a feedback that we get from the leather industry is that the quality of the hides coming now into tanneries is inferior to 10, 20 years ago. And it can be questioned, like, what is the reason that the leather quality is inferior? Does it have to do with the nutrition of the animals? How we treat them? Is it the stress level that they go through? What is causing these quality instabilities in leather that we observe now from a tannery perspective, where not as many hides can be used for the best quality as it was in the past? So it's a question that I have no answer yet to, and it will be interesting to observe as well. Maybe we follow these guys here. What kind of leather quality can we find with those cows as they lived in an organic way, and they are very well treated. We were able to observe this the last 2 days here on this farm, and it's just unbelievable what kind of life they have here and how respectfully they are treated.
Absolutely, how close to their natural environment this is. I think we all know and understand this is the way to be, but again, it comes down to it's expensive. It produces an expensive meat, expensive milk. But as we consumers understand and accept this format, I think we're more okay to going back to the balance and natural way of doing things. So maybe we can go on to the next level, which is the leather production, the ethical concerns in the leather production. I believe it's different than the rawhide and animal welfare side. What ethical concerns come to mind when we consider the leather production side, the tannery industry?
Yeah, and I think this is for many other industries the same. We have the transparent production sites, which are very proud of what they do, and then we have the shadow production site, I would call it, where there are non-ethical behaviors, where there might be child labor involved, where the environment is not taken as much care of, where as well workers are not having the protective gear that they should have, like glasses, protective glasses or gloves or whatever is needed when they come into contact with either chemicals or the skins as such. And I think there is a big difference in what is visible and what is not visible. Unfortunately, the shadow side gets more visibility
Right.
by reportage and documentaries rather than all those tanneries who do good. And again, we repeat ourselves by mentioning Leather Working Group.
Yeah.
This is an NGO doing audits on behalf of us as a human society, going into tanneries, and you go through a full audit, and everything is monitored and looked into. ESG reporting is now a new topic coming into place in Europe, and that will as well enhance practices so that you need to become more transparent in what you do. So I think there are things on the right way. We have the Green Deal coming into place with Europe. I'm a little bit concerned that now with political changes around the world, the Green Deal might be softened, whereas it was on a very good way to really make a change
Mhm.
in all our approach to production as well. And yeah, we see what's going to happen.
Yeah, this is as it comes down to the price point and profit chasing aspect of our system today. As we travel for leather, we have seen those plants and tanneries that are, not putting the artisan's life or safety in the forefront or the environment's health in the forefront. But if you're getting your leather from a tannery that is, in Europe, in US or in China, they are subject to much more regulation. You can't really do some of the practices if they let alone they may have done. Um, but in a consumer from a consumer standpoint, when you see the cheapest point leather goods, that's where things may get a little bit shady, because to be able to reach those price points, people find very creative ways of finding those locations they can still, cut all those corners
Yeah, and then
possible.
as a consumer, you're still happy to have found a purse for 20 euros or
Yeah,
something, and you buy it because you're just like, oh, well, look at this. It's this beautiful leather and it's
right,
good quality. And then, yes, you don't know how it was produced, where it was produced, under which circumstances it was
right.
produced.
I think that's
But
why.
it doesn't say necessarily that if you buy a purse for 500 euros, that it was built or done in better
Or
circumstances. Huh?
2000, we just had an issue last year. It was huge. One of the, well, some of the highest end luxury brands were involved in a scandal like this in Italy. I'm sure you've heard of. And it was made in Italy, but the conditions, the ethical circumstances were unbelievable, inhumane. Like, no one could believe that that could be done today in Italy, but unfortunately it was the case. And how does the consumer know when they're paying the top dollar for a leather bag, the people making these bags in Italy are in their under almost slavery conditions?
Yeah, I think that is, and there fortunately there is some journalists out
Hmm.
investigating this and who found this, and I think this is as well another dilemma of production chains that we have
Yeah,
worldwide in the meanwhile, where unfortunately we have some brands and companies taking advantage of this, and I don't even think that necessarily the brand was aware that that was happening in the
no,
background because they were auditing the front house.
right,
Yeah, but then they did not know that behind there was in the back row, there was another house where actually then the
very
mass
creative.
production was happening under the most cruel circumstances that
Right.
we can imagine, and that in Europe. And fortunately, it was investigative journalism finding out. And now, fortunately, as well, the courts in Italy are behind those brands and saying you need to control better your supply chain. And it's really necessary. And I think, I mean, it can happen to all of us
True.
because you can only do check as much as you can check and then believe what you see
It's true.
is everything,
Right.
and not knowing that there is a next gate with something which looks like hell.
It sounds like to me there is need for independent organizations to be doing that investigation on behalf of consumer, and maybe even for governments like LWG. We'll keep coming back that example on the tanneries. I think there are some organizations certifying some manufacturing practices uh, of leather crafting factories to prevent these kind of circumstances. And we probably need to establish them further and get the branding word out so the consumer can know what to look for when they're reading their descriptions, and trust the brands who have those kind of certifications in place. So let's talk about the final step, the crafting process, even though that Italy example was kind of related to it, but we can think about ethical concerns at a global scale where leather goods are produced today.
Yeah, I think that is a dilemma that we are facing because we desire this world of cheapness and available products all the time and anywhere. And when we look into Pakistan, as I mentioned before, they offer themselves as being a very low cost country. And are we in favor to relocate the production to there? Those people will be happy to have work at the end of the day. So it's as well something where we can look into how much responsibility do we have to as well share work around the world, um, but in a fair manner.
Yeah, very measured way, because 125 euros a month might sound insanely crazy low to us, but that could be the life standards for the country. And what if they don't even have that work? Like, it's $0 in that case. So it's a double-edged sword, but we need to, I think, spread this wealth and abundance in a very conscious and humane way possible. Well, I think we could talk about this a lot longer than that without having a clear solution. But next episode, we're gonna get to the real good part, the longevity and durability of leather goods, with a special guest, a designer from the industry. Again, thank you for another great episode
Thank
discussing
you.
the ethics.
And thank you for the cows being surrounded.
Yeah, this was amazing. They come and listen to our conversation. I think they agree.